Allen & Company wishes OOIDA and all members a safe, healthy, and joyous holiday season.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
OOIDA fights for the rights of all truck drivers, and one of the ways it does that is by advocating for its 150,000 members. We speak with the association's public relations director about recent headlines in trucking news and how OOIDA is working to dispel the driver shortage myth, increase truck parking, and encourage lawmakers to show their support for the industry. It's said that people are the most creative when they face a crisis. That's certainly true for the residents of a small eastern Tennessee town cut off by the flooding from Hurricane Helene. They found a creative way to reconnect with the world, and it involves semitrailers. I'll talk with Aaron Rigsby, a storm chaser who visited the area, about the problem they faced and how they solved it. And finally, is the pilot program to bring people under 21 years of age into interstate trucking meeting its goals? That's the question that the Congressional Research Service is trying to answer in an interim report that's just come out. I'll get some details from Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. The number of people working in trucking stayed flat last month. The Bureau of Labor Statistics counted more than 1.5 million trucking jobs in October, down just about 100 from September. The trucking employment situation has been mostly stable since August, despite many in the industry warning about a driver glut. David Spencer, Vice President of Market Intelligence at Arrive Logistics, told Landline that a promising peak season is keeping trucking jobs afloat, but bouncing back from the long freight recession may be further out. Accounting for all transportation sector jobs, employment dropped by nearly 4,000 jobs. Across all industries, employment increased by 12,000 jobs last month, falling way short of expectations, weighed down by the impacts of strikes and hurricanes. The national unemployment rate remained unchanged at 4.1%. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is proposing a compliance delay of its broker financial responsibility rule. In a notice of proposed rulemaking, FMCSA said it plans to move the compliance date back from January 16, 2025 to January 16, 2026. The delay is meant to line up better with the agency's forthcoming online registration system, which won't be ready by this January. FMCSA issued the final rule regarding broker and freight forwarder financial responsibility 1 year ago. The rule takes several steps to improve broker security regulations, including the suspension of operating authority if the available financial security falls below $75,000. The public has been invited to comment on the proposed delay. The deadline to do that is November 19th. A key stretch of highway in Tennessee damaged by Hurricane Helene has reopened to traffic. The Tennessee DOT says a temporary fix to a westbound bridge of Interstate 26 in Unicoi County was made, allowing vehicles to once again cross the Nolichucky River. The westbound lanes are open to all traffic, including commercial vehicles, except oversized loads are not permitted right now. Work continues on a permanent fix for the eastbound lanes. The Tennessee DOT said this is a huge development, especially considering the closure of I-40 for commercial traffic. The season's first chain inspection events are taking place out west. In Oregon, the state DOT will conduct checks on eastbound I-84 east of Pendleton this Thursday, November 7th. Officials said the purpose is to educate truck drivers about chain-up requirements and proper chain use. Meanwhile, in California's Donner Pass, checks have already begun. Semis passing through on Interstate 80 had to stop for brake checks last week following the first snow of the season. Chain requirements were put in place along with the brake checks. As a reminder, each state handles their chain laws differently. For a comprehensive list broken down by state, head to landline.media, click on the Resources tab, and scroll down to Chain Laws 2024. Meanwhile, Colorado drivers don't just have to deal with snow and ice on roadways. They've also got to deal with glare. From early November through February, the Colorado DOT will occasionally close down eastbound I-70 at Floyd Hill when sun glare makes it dangerous to drive. The closures pop up in the early morning hours after sunrise and until about 8:30 a.m. Closures average between 45 minutes and an hour. Detours are available, but there are height restrictions in place through Clear Creek Canyon, so be advised. Aurora's deployment of driverless trucks has been delayed until April 2025. Aurora previously said its fully autonomous trucks would be traveling between Dallas and Houston by the end of 2024, but company leadership told investors last week that they're pushing back the timeline a bit. The company plans to start its operations with as many as 10 trucks and expand from there. That includes plans to operate driverless trucks between Fort Worth and Phoenix sometime next year. The new developments come as the U.S. Department of Commerce is taking a look at the threat of cyber attacks with regard to autonomous vehicles. A proposed rule would prohibit transactions involving connected vehicle technology by China or other foreign adversaries. OOIDA, expressing support in formal comments, said federal oversight is needed to protect private, personal, and vehicle information. The association also noted that the Department of Defense disclosed that a Chinese company sells LiDAR to Aurora. An Iowa woman is headed to prison for stealing money from a family-based trucking company. Leanne Rouse pleaded guilty to wire fraud earlier this year. She had been working for the company as a bookkeeper for more than 5 years. Rouse said she issued more than 200 unauthorized checks to herself from the company, stealing more than $450,000 in the process. She then covered her tracks by cooking the books. Rouse was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and was ordered to pay back her former employer all the money she stole. A new interstate is coming to Arkansas. A dedication ceremony on Thursday will celebrate the designation. A 110-mile stretch of U.S. Highway 67 between North Little Rock and Walnut Ridge will become Interstate 57. When complete, the interstate will connect Arkansas to the north-south Interstate 57 corridor, which runs between Chicago and Sikeston, Missouri. Pilot Flying J has announced the grand prize winner of its 2024 Road Warrior contest. It's Liz Leone of Victorville, California. Leone, currently a driver for 4Gen Logistics, has been a professional driver for more than 19 years, accumulating an average of 100,000 crash-free miles per year. As a grand prize winner, she was awarded with a $25,000 check for the first time in 2024. Pilot also selected a $1,000 winner each week in September during the Road Warrior nomination period. And finally, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is being recognized as one of the top places for women to work in the trucking and transportation industry. The association made the Women in Trucking Association's 2024 list, which highlights companies that embody important attributes when it comes to fostering an inclusive environment. More than 100 companies, motor carriers, and industry groups made the cut this year. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Christopher A. Winter of Memphis, Tennessee. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 20 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 150 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rotella. And if you're interested in receiving the Safe Driving Award, you can find a link to more information at our website, landlinenow.com. Again, that website, landlinenow.com. Starting Tuesday, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the TA in Denmark, Tennessee. That's located at Exit 68 on Interstate 40. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. OOIDA is teaming up with Wreaths Across America to help honor U.S. military veterans. OOIDA will offer the chance to sponsor a wreath for $17. For every wreath sponsored, $5 will go toward the association's annual Truckers for Troops campaign, which benefits veteran organizations and sends care packages to active military personnel who are stationed overseas. We'll have a direct link to where you can sponsor a wreath at landlinenow.com. Next, Ashley Blackford discusses some of the latest action by OOIDA that made it into the news with the association's public relations director, Narita Taylor. And I'll cover how an eastern Tennessee town cut off by flooding solved that problem with storm chaser Aaron Rigsby. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibertech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibertechtvd.com.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Owner-operators need roadside speed. Truckdown.com.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. Norita Taylor joins me now to talk headlines. She is the Director of Public Relations for OOIDA. Norita, thank you for coming in.
Hey, it's always my pleasure to come on down and chat.
Now, today we are going to look at some of the stories that OOIDA has had a voice in lately, starting off with our Executive Vice President, Louis Pugh, who was recently on the What the Truck podcast. What were some of the topics discussed on that?
Sure. So he was on there with host Dooner on What the Truck with FreightWaves, and he was able to talk about a lot of different things, but mainly he was able to hit on a couple of recent things, recent news pieces that have also been covered in Landline Media regarding some newly released grants for truck parking, as well as something that we talk about a lot around here, which is what we call the myth of a truck driver shortage.
Mm-hmm. Now, yes, I wanted to touch on that. I was reading a news story the other day in the mainstream media, and they, of course, referred to the truck shortage. Do you think we're making any headway on that? I mean, I've worked here for almost 3 years, and I'm like, have we gotten any further in this?
We have. We actually have over the past 5 or 6 years made a lot of headway. It just seems that the ones that want to insist the opposing counterpoint just keep doubling down and refuse to give up that narrative, because they have a lot at stake to keep that out there, a lot of agendas to push, and but that's okay. We have whittled away, and we think that we've gotten some pretty big media placements and narratives out there about that.
Do you notice a few of the stories I think I've read of trucking schools, or schools in general, kind of pushing that narrative and reporters just going with it? Is that kind of one of the problems? And
as a matter of fact, I've talked about that internally, externally, with media, with whomever, about that. That I think sometimes what happens is that reporters or editors, publications, they want to do good things for their readers. Mm-hmm. If there's a job that they think is open and applies to their audience, and they're not wrong to think that way, but they think that they're doing a service by telling the world, hey, look, there's an opportunity for you here. And they're not wrong. There are opportunities, but it's not because of some vast shortage. It's because, yes, there are opportunities, there's turnover, there's all kinds of ways that you can get involved in trucking, but this part about, some vast shortage is just something that we won't accept because the data just doesn't back it up.
Yeah. Now, I want to touch back on the parking grants, $30 million for truck parking. Talk to me more about that.
Sure. So back in the spring, we actually had sent some letters of support to the DOT for a couple of those. One was for Wisconsin and the other one for Ohio. And what that meant was they were going to be reconstructing or reopening some closed rest areas. And rest areas are a really great place, to get your hours of service requirements, get some rest, stop, for all motorists, for that matter. And the other one was Nevada, was as part of this recent news. And so, like I said, we had sent some letters of support for those grants, and they finally came through, and we made sure to reach back out to some of the media that we've been talking to kind of keep that conversation going and let them know there's headway being made and there's updates on this. It's not just about some of the other things that we push regarding the parking shortage.
Are we hoping to, I mean, this is great. Are we hoping to see more of this in the future?
That's exactly what we want to see. And as listeners know, there is the one parking bill out there that will release a lot of funds for parking spaces. But when we look at these things, we definitely want to make sure it's known that we support them, we celebrate them. There's always, and there will be more. There will be more things like this happening. Yes.
Driver shortage, truck parking. Those are two topics I feel like I've covered a lot, and I feel like I will be covering a lot.
It's never going to end, Ashley. I'm sorry. I hate to break the news to you.
Now, OOIDA President Todd Spencer recently wrote an opinion piece. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So kind of laying the groundwork here, there is another bill that we've been, pushing for. It is the GOT Act. And what that would do is reverse an old provision with with labor standards about overtime. And basically, they had made truck drivers exempt from that decades and decades ago. And it's high time to get rid of that because we think that truck drivers should get paid for all of their time. And we have been trying to get a particular lawmaker here in Missouri to support that. And trying over and again, finally said, you know what, we're going to call this person out. And we put together an op-ed about that information, and Todd signed off on. He actually had a lot in input on it as well. But basically, Senator Josh Hawley is the individual that we were calling out. And we got that put out there in Missouri newspapers. So
nice.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how, OOIDA, of course, is in Washington on a national level, but talk to me about kind of the work that happens in the state and, of course, in the state of Missouri, because that's where headquarters is at.
Sure. So while we do have, a local presence of some kind, we do have to work with some local media, even though we are a national organization, because we advocate on behalf of members who live in all kinds of different jurisdictions, all kinds of different states, all 50 states. And each of those areas has their own representatives. And those are the people that we're trying to influence on behalf of our members. And we want to make sure that if there's local media that apply to that, then we're reaching out to them just as well.
And talk to me about the importance, of course, OOIDA is doing a lot of legwork, but how important is it that our members who have these concerns go to their representatives, their government officials, and talk to them?
It's the most important thing. We'll tell people in Washington, D.C., we have more than 150,000 members, but it doesn't do us any good to say that if no one's hearing from those 150,000 members. They need to hear from you, the constituents. You're the ones with the stories to tell. We do everything we can to advocate on your behalf, to streamline the information, work with the media, all of these things, report the information, but they need to hear from you. You're the one who goes to the polls to vote for or against those individuals, and they answer to you at the end of the day, and they do want to hear from you. They want to hear the stories. They want to hear what it's really like to deal with a particular challenge, a particular issue, trying to find a place to park, dealing with all of these different things that you deal with on a daily basis just to move goods across the highways.
And OOIDA does make that pretty easy to do. Tell me how easy that is to do.
It's so easy. Basically, all you have to do is go to a particular website, fightingfortruckers.com, and all of the issues that we talk about on your behalf are there. And along the right-hand side, there's a column where you can drop down your region, your area, your representatives. There's some templates there that you can use regarding the topics you want to talk about, but they are editable. You can change them. You can use your own words, make a few changes, make a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do for your situation, and make that note. And all you do is you click and send, and it goes right to the person that represents you.
Another common topic I wanted to talk about was on cybersecurity and autonomous trucks. What's been talked about that lately?
Sure. So basically, recently, OOIDA sent some comments in support of a proposal that would ban the use of certain connectivity that is owned and operated by foreign entities such as China and Russia. Now, basically, the big concern here is with our industry is with autonomous trucks. And we've been calling out cybersecurity dangers all over the place. And this is just another opportunity to basically put, help mitigate that, danger. We want to make sure that these things can't be remotely controlled by, bad actors, remotely manipulated. I'll let that phrase sit out there for a second. Remotely manipulated. Can you imagine an 80,000-pound truck being remotely controlled by a bad actor? I don't think we want that to happen.
Definitely not. That is a scary thought. Now, in a couple of weeks, Truckers for Troops will be happening. For those who aren't familiar with what that is, can you tell me more about what it is and what OOIDA does?
I don't know anything about Truckers for Troops.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, annual Truckers for Troops. Yeah, can't wait to get that going. We've been growing that program for a number of years now and can't wait to get that going. We just recently took a trip to South Dakota where we presented the Veterans Community Project with some donations there. It's a really great program. So some of the proceeds from Truckers for Troops goes to VCP, but a lot of it also goes to care packages. This started as a care package program. It is still a care package program for those for military serving overseas, especially in combat areas. And basically during the week of Veterans Day, we will discount the membership to $35. 10% of that will go to Truckers for Troops, and OOIDA, the association, will match that as well for Truckers for Troops.
And for those unfamiliar, talk to me more about VCP and what they do.
Sure. So the Veterans Community Project, they actually have several locations. They're not just here in Kansas City. They're growing. Their goal is to be in every state of the union. And so they actually have two locations here in Missouri, one in Kansas City and one in St. Louis. And they have other locations that they're working on growing. South Dakota has been just got its building, its community center building, and it has several tiny homes. All of these Veterans Community Project places have a combination of services. They have tiny homes for veterans who are unhoused, and then they also have outreach services, and they have all kinds of services they can provide to all veterans. And I want to make it clear that it's not just like going to the Veterans Administration where you have to go through a lot of red tape. They will help all veterans. The way they phrase it is that anyone who has raised their right hand and taken that oath, they count you as a veteran regardless of your discharge status. And one of the really great things I like about this program is that on the residential campuses for their tiny homes, they allow the residents to keep their pets because they recognize that was a barrier to getting some of the unhoused veterans to transfer to some sort of housing on a temporary basis. That's something that they don't want to give up. They don't want to leave their pet. And so that's something I think is really, really wonderful.
I had the opportunity to interview a gentleman that was at the Kansas City location, and he said, if his dog couldn't come, he wouldn't have come. He would have stayed homeless. And I just thought that was, any pet owner, I think, can sympathize with that.
And that's a unique service with the Veterans Community Project. Very, very few homeless shelters of any kind allow pets at all.
Yeah, quite incredible. And what's the date for that again?
So that is the week of Veterans Day, which begins on November the 9th or 10th.
All right, wonderful. Norita, thank you very much for your time.
Hey, you bet. Anytime, Ashley.
That was Norita Taylor with OOIDA. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Never underestimate the ingenuity of people trying to solve a problem in a crisis. And if you do have doubts, all you have to do is take a look at what they've done south of the eastern Tennessee town of Butler. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddick. Welcome back to the program. In this case, a local official says it involves some ordinary citizens of Pogee, a small community within the larger community of Elk Mills. In the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and the record-breaking floods it brought to the region, they found themselves cut off from much of the outside world because a bridge on the road into town was washed out. Enter storm chaser Aaron Rigsby. Mind you, that's not a journalist or a tornado chaser. Rigsby is fascinated by all kinds of stormy weather. He was in the area and heard about how those locals solved their problem, and it involved what appears to be 9 flatbed trailers and a pile of rocks. Let's get to the kind of case at hand here. This involves a section of far eastern Tennessee, and obviously, very tragic situation there for the folks affected by the remnants of Hurricane Helene. But one town here kind of has done something ingenious with all the washed out roads and bridges. Can you describe what these folks have done?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, I've been doing this for 14 years and I've covered a lot of disasters. I've seen a lot of the worst destruction that you could possibly see. And when I first got to North Carolina and Tennessee, I had never witnessed such a caliber of this proportion of extreme flooding. And the way that these folks in the Appalachian Mountains have come together to figure out ways to, not only help their neighbor, but to almost adjust to a new society that they have been thrown into, because there's still communications cut off. They still are with very minimal cell service. And a lot of these folks, they only have 1 or 2 roads to get out of there. And it really just goes to show not only the strength of the human mind, but, the kind of contraptions that humans can come up with in order to compromise in these kind of disastrous situations. And when I first got word about this, it was near a little small town in Butler, Tennessee. When I first got word of this, there was really only like a picture of it. It really wasn't being covered a whole lot. And I had to talk to a few locals to eventually find it. And what they created here was absolutely incredible. They took 3 flatbed semi-trailers, buckled it up with some big boulders and rocks behind it, almost as to act as the support beams to lock it in place, which is now just a normal stream versus the raging river that it was, that took out their main bridge that is able to get folks across the mountains and back to the main highway and back up to Butler, Tennessee. And I'm not exactly sure what they created the actual platform on that is acting as the bridge, but it almost looks like some kind of like a material that they also use on like a different version of the flatbed vehicles. And it's able to hold enough weight for even power crew trucks to drive across it, to get up into those communities to restore power, because that's been one of the biggest issues right now, especially in those counties up in higher elevations of the Appalachian Mountains, is that they only have 1 or 2 roads to work with. The journey to get there is rough and slow. And then you're running into this problem where the bridges have been completely washed out and the power crews can't get over there to restore power and get that necessary supplies to folks. So the fact that this community was not only able to come up with this idea, but to get it done in such a short amount of time is nothing short of remarkable. I've never seen anything like it.
And I agree with you. Looking at the video that you took of this, it appears the actual deck of the bridge is made of 6 flatbed trailers. It looks very clear to me that that's what those are. Is they've taken the wheels off and used those 6, 2 wide and about 3 long, across the 3 flatbeds that kind of run parallel with the stream to form the base supports. So pretty ingenious there. I'm kind of curious, had you talked to anybody about how they put this thing together?
So unfortunately, when I was there, a lot of the folks had kind of packed up for the evening because there is about a half a lane to work with, and they've almost been kind of like on a routine schedule where they have been pretty much working all day, all evening to clear debris, and then they kind of trickle out of there later in the evening, which is when I arrived there. So I didn't really get to talk to many folks on how they created it, but what I did discover is not necessarily, this is a little bit across the border into North Carolina, but we've seen several instances of these creative creations where they're either piling up dirt to make bridges, those semi-trailers, but there's been a group referred to as the West Virginia Boys, and they actually built a road from Batcave to Chimney Rock in just 3 days with their bulldozers and dozers that they've had. And that has allowed a lot of the supplies, again, making up for perspective, they were expecting this to take months, if not a year, to be able to create some sort of road from Batcave to Chimney Rock. And while this isn't permanent, obviously, these guys took time out of their lives to not only come down to North Carolina, but they got this road done in literally 3 days. And the way that they created it was just nothing short of remarkable. I was allowed exclusive access to drive across it because it's mostly just emergency personnel and residents through there. But they allowed me to document that and, be able to tell their story of this. And basically, they were just like, from what I understand, they were basically just heard the cries of the Carolinas, knew that they had to do something about it. They showed up there. When I was talking to the person at the checkpoint, they looked at him and they said, "We're going to build you a road. We only need 3 days. How do you feel about it?" And they basically just gave them the go ahead. And now folks can get from Batcave to Chimney Rock and get a lot of that necessary supplies to help those recovery efforts.
I'm curious. Obviously, you were there for the remnants of Helene and what happened with that storm. But I'm curious. How did you find this bridge? I mean, how did you find out that there was something there to go and see? Because I've looked at the map. This is not on the beaten path.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I've been covering this event is I wanted to cover, we've been talking a lot about the flooding and like the deforestation that's been going on, the hurricane itself, but my goal when I went, especially back down this time around, because this is almost a month later, I was down there for a week and a half the first time, had to cover Milton, and then eventually made my way back there. I wanted to cover all of these small details because I feel like a lot of these folks that are doing remarkable things like this almost get overshadowed by the flood itself. And it's nothing really on purpose. It's just there's so much going on that people don't really hear about stuff like this. And I saw one picture floating around on X, and I replied to the person. I was like, "Hey, if you don't mind me asking, do you mind, where is this exactly?" They told me it was near Butler, Tennessee, and they told me a couple of crossroads that it was at. Now, granted, mind you, a lot of the roads are still flooded out, so I had no clue if I could even get to this place. And when I showed up to where I thought that the intersection was, the main highway that goes to Butler was closed. And I was talking to one of the officers who was nice enough to let me go through, see how close I could get and see if I could talk to someone else about finding this bridge. And then I came to another road closure where the road had been washed out, but there was still about a little less than a full lane. And so I was talking to some locals. I'm like, "Hey, can you get through there?" They're like, "Yeah, just be careful, stay to the right side and you'll be fine." So once I worked my way through there, I was able to get to their command post that they have set up there for supplies, donations for a lot of the residents around there. And then that's where I was able to talk to a couple more people. And it was actually back into the valley there. So there's like a main interstate there, a main county highway. The name is slipping in off the top of my mind, but it's also closed because they have bridge damage. It's intact, but it's damaged from all the debris coming through. And it's actually back through this valley. You cross another bridge, and then you kind of zigzag your way back into the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. But it gives a certain perspective too, because when you're driving down these main county roads and you come across bits and pieces of the damage, it doesn't necessarily grasp the full scale of what's going on back deeper into the Appalachian Mountains, where people called this place home, and their one way out is that bridge. And I tell you, that bridge was not a bad bridge. It wasn't an old rickety bridge. I mean, there are concrete pillars that are literally still laying in the riverbed down there. And when I arrived there to document the bridge, when I finally found it, it's nothing more than a stream right now. To tell you how severe this flooding was. I mean, this stream or creek, whatever it typically is on its normal level, was turned into a raging torrent of water that was able to take out a bridge that a lot of those folks probably never imagined could have even possibly happened. So it was quite remarkable not only to see it, but to talk to some of the folks on just a personal level, because, me as a storm chaser, it's really easy when you're talking to people for it to come across the wrong way, especially in a freshly disastered area, because I'm not just there as some tourist taking pictures. Like, people need to hear about this stuff. And they were more than welcoming to point me in the correct direction. And the outreach that it got on social media is exactly what I was going for, because people deserve to know and see these images and document it on a professional level of what these folks are not only going through, but what they are capable of and how strong they are to be able to pick themselves back up and build this bridge to get people across.
Have you ever, in your experience as a storm chaser, and of course we're talking outside of Helene here, but have you seen any place on any other storm where the locals have improvised like this to replace a bridge or a road? I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Have you?
No, absolutely not. Not to this level anyway. Like, I've seen some like small like creations, or, like people just kind of like piling up dirt to like kind of like patch an area of a road. I've never seen such makeshift creations on so many different levels across such a widespread area. And the common theme of it is it's literally like no one is helping them. They are literally like either strangers helping stranger or volunteers that have come from out of state to come down there to specifically help those folks get these creations made to get people off of those mountains and to safety where they can be able to get some of that supplies. There was even people during the height of this that was going on. There was volunteers bringing their own personal helicopters, not rescue agencies, their personal helicopters to come in, drop down, and pick people off from the mountaintops at their homes because all the roads and bridges had been washed away. These are just regular volunteers bringing their own personal helicopters down there as it was happening.
I'm just kind of agog at the idea of your own personal helicopter. So,
yeah.
I just have a little bit of time left here, Aaron, but can you briefly describe to us, I think people don't really have an idea, and you mentioned some of this before, but how bad is the damage in that area? I mean, can you kind of illustrate for us in words, especially for people who have never seen something like this?
The best way that I can describe this is if you take almost like a mini tsunami or the storm surge damage that we typically see along the Gulf Coast from, category 3-4 hurricanes, and you spread that across the entire Appalachian Mountains from Tennessee, North Carolina, even portions of Virginia down into Georgia. That's exactly what we have been dealing with across those areas. It is essentially, if you have a house or any kind of property that was along any stream, creek, or river, it is either gone or damaged heavily because of how widespread that flooding was. When I was early on trying to describe this to people, is like, I think when we think of flooding, we think of a river that flooded really bad, that took out some houses, or a flash flood that, like, you see some cars floating around. And it is not that at all. It is literally every creek and stream here was turned into a raging torrent of water. And most of the creek beds or the river beds have either doubled in size or have caused so much erosion on the sides of the cliffs that once were there that is just completely unrecognizable. Even some of the locals have told me that it's not supposed to look like this. There's literally 7 feet of new earth that has been carved out on both sides of this. And the amount of trees that have been just completely just leveled and laid over along those riverbeds because of how fast the water was moving, it's just undescribable. And it's not even just limited to that. Like, we've been talking a lot about the flooding, but even in Asheville, the amount of deforestation that occurred, mind you, this hurricane made landfall in Florida. There's so many trees down in Asheville that it is literally, it's going to take them years and years and years to bounce back from that. And then the long-term effects that these folks are going to be dealing with, with wildfire danger, future landslides from the earth settling in that didn't fall necessarily from Helene. So the impacts are not going to be just limited to the next several months. This is going to be a years-long issue for the folks of the Appalachian Mountains all through there.
Aaron, thank you very much for your time. I sure appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
That was storm chaser Aaron Rigsby talking about a bridge made of 9 flatbed trailers that ordinary citizens built to connect their town back with the outside world after flooding caused by Hurricane Helene. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Is the pilot program to bring people under 21 years of age into interstate trucking meeting its goals? That's the question that the Congressional Research Service is trying to answer in an interim report that's just come out. Here with some details is Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mark. How about yourself?
Very well. Before we get into the nitty-gritty here, we have not talked a lot on the program about the Congressional Research Service. So who are they? Who do they work for? And what kind of work do they generally do?
Yeah, so the Congressional Research Service, we were really getting into the weeds here. But Congressional Research Service, or CRS, is basically Congress's internal research body. And what they do is basically they provide impartial analysis of legislation, of legislative issues, and they really dig into, the legislative history on things. So it's kind of a go-to resource for lawmakers and their staff. Speaking as someone who worked on Capitol Hill a number of years ago, it is something that lawmakers' offices really rely on at times to help understand issues.
So why are they doing a report on this program? And I should note here, it's officially called the Safe Driver Apprenticeship Pilot, but obviously just to get under 21 truckers going interstate. Why are they doing this report?
Yeah, and so they don't officially say here, but at times these reports can come about because lawmakers' offices have requested them. It can also be, though, because they just stay on top of ongoing issues. And so this Safe Driver Apprenticeship Program, or we'll call it the Under 21 Pilot Program, is something that was mandated in the last highway bill. It's something that's ongoing at the Department of Transportation, and certainly there's a lot of interest in it. So it makes sense that this is something that they would at least provide a little update on.
So let's get into the report a little bit here. It's not a final report, which is important, but more kind of a current status report. Roughly speaking, what does it say the current status of the pilot program is?
Yeah, really they give numbers on participation in the program, and they are not very high. This is something that we've really kind of known. FMCSA has been putting this information out there, but the way that this report kind of compiles that information is pretty stark. And so to start really where there's at least maybe potentially some of the higher interest is from motor carriers. So the report says that FMCSA has received a total of 112 applications. But so far, only 34 of those have been approved. And another 36 are pre-qualified and look to be approved. That kind of, again, gets into the weeds. But basically, there are some program requirements that were removed, and it's likely that those carriers will come into compliance. So we're looking at around, 70 carriers that are participating in this program. But what's kind of jumps out at me more is the number of apprentice applications that have been approved. And through the end of 2023, there's only been 36 approvals. So that is a very low number, especially if we're trying to get an understanding of, how safe our under 21 drivers going to be.
It's interesting because obviously this is a level of participation that's a fraction of what the Department of Transportation was either anticipating or hoping for. Congress has made some adjustments to try and help move this thing along. What sort of adjustments have they made?
Yes, and so as part of the most recent funding bill that was enacted, basically Congress removed a requirement from this program that carriers had to participate in a registered apprenticeship program with the Department of Labor. That is not a requirement that was included in the highway bill, but DOT implemented that because they said this would help them get the under 21 pilot program up and running more quickly. And at the time it was implemented, ATA actually said, this will be good. This will help implement the gold standard for training with the pilot program. But as we saw lackluster participation numbers in the program, ATA and other supporters turned on that requirement, and they've said that that's actually preventing carriers from participating in the program. So Congress went ahead and removed it and prohibited Department of Transportation from requiring it. So it wouldn't be a surprise if we do see more carriers participate in the program and the number of participants increase. But that was one of the hangups that carriers said was in place. But again, they've had a mixed history on their thoughts with that apprenticeship program.
In addition to that, I think it's important here to point out that the program dropped something else, which is driver-facing cameras.
Yeah.
And that struck me as very interesting because some of the carriers that have pushed for the apprenticeship program are requiring the cameras of their experienced drivers, but now not wanting them with the least experienced drivers. And that really strikes me as nonsensical.
Yeah, you're right. I think trying to lay blame or find a scapegoat for why hasn't been a ton of participation in this. But you're right. It's maddening when some of the largest carriers out there are requiring inward-facing cameras of their drivers, of their experienced drivers, but yet that's not something that's going to be required of these new drivers. We hear from our members, from owner-operators working, that these are the types of things that carriers are trying to, maybe work into their lease agreements or things like that. And so it's hard to stomach the idea that this is really what's preventing carriers and drivers from participating in this program when it seems so pervasive everywhere else.
Now, Congress has made those adjustments, but the report actually listed a number of other options that Congress could undertake to try and make this program work. What were some examples of those?
Yeah, and so that's kind of CRS's job here. They're not taking necessarily a position, but kind of laying out those options. And they say, Congress, if they wanted, could provide additional oversight to the program and require more official and more periodic reporting on how it's going. They also point out that Congress could establish this program permanently. They also say, Congress could initiate a new pilot program if they're not happy with the way that it's going. And they also point out that Congress could just end it. Congress really has the power to do whatever they want with this. This is something that we have opposed from the get-go. But given that the reality is the program is ongoing, we certainly would support increased oversight of the program. Another thing I think that's interesting to flag is that we've already seen some efforts or some legislation to change the program, or at least change this under 21 conversation. Last year, there was legislation introduced, and if you'll bear with me, it's a little confusing the way it's worded, but basically the legislation, if it was enacted, would require the Department of Transportation to permanently allow under 21-year-old drivers if the pilot program showed that under 21 drivers weren't less safe. So in other words, Congress basically said, unless you can show us that under 21 drivers are more dangerous, then you have to go ahead and do this no matter what. So if the under 21 pilot program was inconclusive or had any other number of problems, this legislation would basically say DOT doesn't matter. You still have to move forward with having under 21 drivers.
So with the figures and how low they are, with all the efforts they've already made and all the efforts they're planning to try and make this thing work, at some point, is it logical to carry on with this pilot program and continue to try and get these younger drivers, or are we just beating a dead horse?
I mean, we're going to say we're beating a dead horse here. There was previously the under 21 military pilot program that had lackluster participation, and there wasn't really much that could be drawn from that. I imagine it's going to be the same case here. But I also imagine we're going to continue to hear reasons why this study wasn't representative or the government didn't run it right, and we still need to move forward with this. So we're going to keep on top of that and keep watching, but we don't expect that this is going to show any data that resoundingly shows that we should move ahead and under 21 drivers are going to be safer.
Okay. Well, Bryce, thank you very much for the information. We sure appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office, and remember to call your elected representatives about this issue. You can do that by dialing the U.S. Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us. Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.